This month, in the summer of 2026, a building opened on the south side of Chicago that cost $850 million. It has no bedrooms, nobody lives there. And the man whose name is on it already owns 3 other homes worth more than $28 million combined. It's the Obama Presidential Center, and it is, by a wide margin, the most expensive monument any former president has ever built to himself. Which got me thinking about a question I'd never really stopped to ask. When you've lived at the most famous address on Earth, the White House, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, where on earth do you go next? Where does a former president actually live? The answer, it turns out, is a world of multi-million-dollar mansions, lifetime bodyguards, $250,000 pensions, and $850 million museums, all of it partly on your dime. Let me show you. Here's the first thing to understand. A former president is never really unemployed. The moment they walk out of the White House, a machine switches on around them, and it's written into law. It's called the Former President's Act, signed in 1958. The story usually told is that it was inspired by Harry Truman, who left office in 1953 and supposedly went home to Missouri so broke he had to take out a bank loan just to get by. It's a great story. Some historians now argue Truman was actually far wealthier than he ever let on. But true or not, the legend stuck, and Congress decided no former president should ever be left to struggle again. So what does the machine give them? First, a pension, and it is not small. A former president's pension is pegged to the salary of a cabinet secretary, which in 2025 works out to $250,600 every single year for the rest of their life. To put that in perspective, that single pension is more than 3 times what the average American household earns in a year, and they collect it no matter how many tens of millions they may already be worth. And as you're about to see, most of them are worth an absolute fortune. Then there's the office. The government rents them an office anywhere in the country, furnishes it, and staffs it, and there is no legal cap on the rent. In a recent budget, taxpayers were paying around $727,000 a year just for Joe Biden's office, $640,000 for Bill Clinton's, and over $500,000 each for George W. Bush and Barack Obama. Add in travel, staff, and health benefits, and looking after America's living former presidents runs the taxpayer roughly $4 to $5 million a year, and more than $125 million since the year 2000. And then there's the big one, the bodyguards. Every former president and their spouse receives Secret Service protection for the rest of their lives. That's a detail of armed agents, armored vehicles, and a security perimeter that follows them to every home they own. For a while in the 1990s, Congress tried to cap it at 10 years. Then they changed their minds, and in 2013, lifetime protection was restored for good. And that matters a lot for our question, because every single house I'm about to show you doesn't just have a famous resident. It has a permanent government security operation wrapped around it. So let's actually go to the houses. As of 2026, there are 4 living former presidents of the United States, and the way each of them has chosen to live tells you almost everything about them. Let's start with the man who arguably perfected the post-presidency, Bill Clinton. When the Clintons left the White House in 2001, they were, in Hillary's own famous words, dead broke, buried under millions of dollars in legal fees. So where did they go? Back in 1999, they'd quietly bought a Dutch colonial house on a tree-lined cul-de-sac in Chappaqua, New York, about an hour north of Manhattan, for $1.7 million. 5 bedrooms, a guest house, a pool, and crucially, a property the Secret Service could seal off completely. Then they added a second home, a Georgian mansion in Washington called Whitehaven, right near Embassy Row, bought for $2.85 million, so they had a base in the capital. And from that dead broke starting line, Bill Clinton built a fortune. He gave paid speeches, 54 of them in a single year, at up to $700,000 each. Over about 15 years, the Clintons earned more than $150 million in speaking fees alone. Today, Bill Clinton's net worth is estimated at around $100 million. Not bad for dead broke. Next, George W. Bush, who did almost the exact opposite and stepped out of the spotlight entirely. When he left office in 2009, he and Laura settled into a roughly $3 million home in Preston Hollow, one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in Dallas, an 8,500 square foot house tucked behind private gates. But the place Bush really retreats to is his ranch, Prairie Chapel Ranch in Crawford, Texas. 1,600 acres of Texas hill country that was nicknamed the Western White House while he was in office. And his post-presidency, he more or less disappeared from politics and took up painting. Quietly in a studio, the former commander-in-chief now paints portraits, including an entire series honoring the wounded veterans who served under him. It is about as far from the speaking circuit as you can possibly get. Then there are the Obamas, who, more than any former first family in history, turned leaving office into a global brand. When Barack Obama's term ended in 2017, the family didn't go far at first. They bought an 8,200 square foot mansion in the Kalorama neighborhood of Washington, D.C., just minutes from the White House for $8.1 million. 9.5 bathrooms, a swimming pool, and yes, a medieval-style turret. But that was only the beginning. They added a beach estate on Martha's Vineyard, that exclusive island off the coast of Massachusetts, for $11.75 million, nearly 30 acres of Atlantic waterfront. And then a third compound in Hawaii, right on the beach, reported at more than $8 million, essentially 3 separate homes on 3 acres of sand. How does a man who earned $400,000 a year as president afford all of that? Books. The Obamas signed a joint book deal reported at $65 million, one of the largest in publishing history, plus a Netflix production deal, speaking fees of up to $400,000 a night, and more. Barack Obama's net worth today is estimated at around $70 million. And then there is his monument, the $850 million presidential center we started with. But hold that thought, because there's a whole secret world behind that building I'll get to in a moment. First, the newest member of this very exclusive club. In January 2025, Joe Biden left the White House and went home to Delaware, the state he'd represented for almost his entire life. He has 2 homes there. The main one sits on Barley Mill Road in Greenville, a leafy suburb of Wilmington. And then there's the one he genuinely loves, a 6-bedroom beach house in Rehoboth Beach, which he bought back in 2017 for $2.7 million. And here's a detail I love. Largely because of the years he then spent in the White House, that beach house alone is now estimated to be worth around $6 million. The presidency, it turns out, is very good for your property values. Now, it wasn't always like this. No pensions, no mansions, no lifetime bodyguards. For most of American history, a president simply left office and was, more or less, on his own. George Washington went home to Mount Vernon, his plantation overlooking the Potomac, and deliberately returned to farming, modeling himself on a Roman general who gave up power to go back to his plow. Thomas Jefferson retired to Monticello, the mountaintop house he'd spent 40 years designing, and died there so deep in debt that his family was forced to sell the house and almost everything inside it. And here is the contrast that says it all. Jimmy Carter, who passed away in late 2024, spent his entire post-presidency in the same modest ranch house in Plains, Georgia, that he had owned since the 1960s. The only home he ever owned, reportedly valued at just a couple $100,000, famously smaller and cheaper than the homes of some of the Secret Service agents guarding it. While other presidents collected mansions, Jimmy Carter collected nothing. He just went home, which leaves the single strangest perk of all, the one that explains that $850 million building in Chicago. Presidential libraries. Here's how it works. After leaving office, a president raises enormous sums of private money, often hundreds of millions of dollars, to build a grand library and museum housing their records and their legacy. Then, traditionally, they hand the keys to the federal government, the National Archives, which runs it forever. It is, in effect, a monument to yourself that the taxpayer then maintains forever. The grandest of them have become genuine tourist destinations, with archives, exhibits, and replica Oval Offices, drawing hundreds of thousands of visitors a year. And the Obama Presidential Center broke that mold entirely. At $850 million, it is the most expensive ever built, more than it cost to construct some of the tallest skyscrapers in America. It won't be run by the National Archives at all. The Obama Foundation keeps control. And to walk in the front door, a ticket costs $30, making it the most expensive presidential museum in the entire country just to visit. So, where do former presidents live after office? The answer is better than almost anyone else alive. In Dutch colonials and Dallas estates, on islands of their own and Hawaiian beaches, wrapped in a permanent ring of armed agents, funded by $250,000 pensions and immortalized in museums that cost the better part of $1 billion. They spend their entire lives climbing toward one single address, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, and then they spend the rest of their lives and a truly remarkable amount of money making absolutely sure the world never forgets they once lived there. So here is my question for you. Of all of them, the mountaintop at Monticello, the ranch in Texas, the beach in Hawaii, or Carter's little house in Plains, which one would you actually want to retire to? Tell me in the comments, I genuinely want to know. And if you enjoyed this little tour behind the velvet rope, well, you already know what to do.